Welcome to the Disaster Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Santo, and this is the show where we reveal the untold horror stories and hard-learned lessons of software as a service startup life as told by the SaaS holes who lived through it. Their stories about the managers, departments, and companies they worked for will leave you thinking, what a disaster. Our mission is to help you bring order and sanity to the chaos you will undoubtedly encounter in your own adventures in SaaS. Through stories and conversations with our guests who have been there and done that in all aspects of SaaS, from sales, marketing, product, and more, you'll get the tools and insights you need to recover from disaster. Today on the Disaster Recovery Podcast, we're digging into customer success, both as a critical team in your company and a guiding philosophy for success. We'll explore what customer success really means, the effort involved to go above and beyond, and scaling those efforts as the business and as the base grow. And finally, we'll hear a tragic tale of disaster in which the failure to embrace customer success as a core company philosophy, along with a healthy dose of tech debt and team debt, led to the complete opposite of customer success. But what would you even call that? Customer failure? I mean, it's not the customer's fault. It's more like a customer letdown. Now, our guest has nearly a decade of experience leading customer success, customer support, and professional services teams and departments at SaaS startups. She's had a strong focus on building scalable programs for companies who have never had these critical organizations, so she knows how to start them from scratch and take them global. The business-to-business, B2B SaaS startups that she's consistently worked at have catered to enterprise organizations, and we all know enterprise accounts require a white glove approach to customer success. Now, she's a member of the executive team at her current company and is eager to share some of the lessons and stories she's collected along the way. But before we get into that, a quick note. The stories shared on the Disaster Recovery Podcast are based on anonymous individual experiences at real companies. The goal in sharing these stories and perspectives is to help fellow SaaS holes learn from each other, get a much-needed sanity check, and build empathy along the way. At no point in time are we mentioning a specific company or person. So if a story feels like an attack on you or an attack on your company, we really encourage you to reflect on why you have that guilty conscience. And with that, on to the show. Welcome to the Disaster Recovery Podcast. It's really great to have you here. And I feel like I'm kind of interrupting because both you and I have the same type of chores planned for this Labor Day weekend, home improvement activities. Tell us a little bit about what you've got going on at your home.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So we've already been to Lowe's once today. I'm sure we'll take another trip. But we're redoing an office and, we actually brought the kids with us, which is great and bad at the same time. But my husband and I really can't make any decisions without our 7-year-old's approval. So she had to come.
I've certainly learned firsthand some of those lessons that you just brought up already. I have not been able to do a home improvement project and only have one trip to Lowe's. So if you're able to pull that off, you're going to have to let me know all of the secrets, because I'll get into it, then I'll realize I don't have a tool, or I just put a hole in the wall and now I need to undo that damage. And I've certainly learned firsthand the importance of getting your kids to buy into whatever is happening, because it makes your life just a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'm hoping for only 2 trips this time, and minimal kid involvement on the paint. Maybe a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, we're all about the disasters here today. So today we're talking about customer success. I want to start off our conversation with a question, kind of like all the questions I ask people starting off, is how do you define customer success?
Yeah, so I really think of customer success about ensuring our customers are getting value out of your solution. It's pretty simple, right? You just want to make sure that customers are getting the value. Everything else around that principle, whether it's ensuring renewals, expansions, advocacy, that all flows from getting the value out of your solution. So if customers are receiving value, then they'll want to partner with you in a lot of different ways, which translates to a lot of success for your business.
Now, when you say value, what exactly is value? Are we talking about ROI and focusing on specific metrics? Are we talking about feelings and perceptions? What do you think on value?
Yeah, it's got to be a mix of both, because you can't just have numbers, because people at the core, they buy on emotions. They don't buy on, oh yeah, I know that I saved $5,000 because I bought this. It's a lot of emotion. So they might feel like they're actually saving more money than really the math would work out to. And a lot of this stuff, especially when you're going in as a startup, there's no baseline. Like, you can't just go in and be like, oh, well, you've been measuring this for 10 years and now here's your ROI. They haven't even been capable of measuring it. So it's a lot of feelings games and making sure that they're feeling like they're getting value out of the solution. And oftentimes your champion has put pretty much their reputation and job on the line to bring in a new solution like yours. And so making sure that you're watching out for them and for their job, that's another big job from a customer success standpoint.
I like how you broke that down. I agree with that idea of appealing both to the emotional side of the equation as well as the rational side, because you can talk numbers all day. Well, you saved 10,000. It's like, cool. Well, I don't feel like I've done anything, but when you really tap into like, oh my God, my life is so much easier, and we just so happen to save the company 10, 20, 100,000, $1 million, that makes for a really strong relationship, direct relationship with the value that's being offered. It also, I think, brings in the idea that there's layers to the value, which is something that I've certainly struggled with optimizing for on the product marketing and solutions consulting side, because it can be a very complex thing. It can almost be a deal by deal, customer by customer, person by person type of experience. I like how you brought up the idea that, especially with SaaS startups, we're talking about technology that hasn't existed in its current shape or its current form, or it's a different take on an already known technology, but there's something new to it. And because that newness is there, there's uncertainty with, okay, but what problem is it really solving? What's the impact of me actually doing something about it? I do my job every single day. I deal with this day in and day out. I don't know that I really need it. So I like how you brought up the fact that in order to get people to value, you have to make sure that they understand how to get to that value, right? Yeah. And it takes people to shepherd them there. And then you called out that the fact that the person bringing in this new product, they're taking a risk. They're putting their career on the line to say, I believe in this thing. Let's bring it in because we believe it's going to have this impact. And then it's up to the customer success team. It's really up to the whole company to come together and deliver on that.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, you actually hit on one of the main things that I feel like is one of the pieces that people often get wrong, is that customer success is not a department. It's really the entire company. And so the whole organization needs to be customer success and customer oriented. So, that's a big piece of making sure that you are successful in the market, is that everybody is customer success. I've seen customers stay because of the relationships that they make with their customer success managers. And that's kind of a really big part of customer success as a whole. It's making sure internally and externally, everybody's successful around the customers.
I've certainly seen firsthand that perspective manifest of customer success being a specific department. Really, customer success is the philosophy, right? Like that's the goal. You might have people who are specifically assigned to work every single day in and day out with the customer. But to your point, that's, just isolating customer success to that group is doing not just the customer a disservice, but the company as a whole a disservice. What are some other thoughts that you have about what people get wrong about customer success?
Yeah. So a lot of what I hear, especially in early stage startups that are just kind of starting to get into customer success and realizing that they need somebody to watch the customers, is they think it's customer support. Those are actually two very different things. Well, there's elements of support in customer success. All you're doing is being reactive to your customers and answering them when they pick up the phone and call you. You're not maximizing that value for your customers or really for you internally, because one of the most valuable things you can get is listening to what your customers are saying about your organization, about your product. And that's how you build that foundation for your product to be able to scale and grow. Because in the end, you could have the best product in the world, but if nobody wants it, yeah, you got nothing.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that firsthand and talked to plenty of people. We've got this great idea. It's this technology that's going to do X, Y, and Z. And people are like, I don't really want that. Yeah, well, that's not really a priority to me. I like how you put it. If you are being reactive, you are not maximizing the value. And I like how you further delved into that by really establishing this idea that you get value, the company gets value when you listen to the customers. And I would take that further. It's not just listen, it's respond. And I don't mean respond by saying, okay, we heard you. I mean like delivering upon whatever you've heard. And that doesn't mean saying yes to every single thing that comes your way, but it is still, I hear you. I see that you're going through this struggle. Here's what we can do to help. Sometimes we can't do anything to help. I'll listen to you. You can call me if you want to talk about it, that type of thing. So that's thinking about it from a reactive standpoint. Let's think about it from a proactive standpoint. What does it look like for customer success to be proactive?
Yeah. So I think about being proactive in customer success in a number of ways. So one is engagement. You have to be engaged with your customers. Make sure that you have, of course, segmented, because we are humans and we can't get to everybody. But in a segmented way, we need to make sure that we're at least reaching out, being like, "How are you doing? We're here. Let me know if you have any issues." Just that small touch point can help. If there's, for example, when we do releases at my current company, and I know a customer has asked for a particular feature, even though they're getting the release notes already, I'll reach out to them personally and say, I know you requested this. Here it is, and here's a little bit more information. Let me know if you have any questions about implementing it. So that took me, 5 minutes to do, and it created value for my customer and for our relationship as we move forward. So that's one, is making sure your customers are engaged. Two, I'm a huge proponent of data. Like, if you don't understand your active users, you don't understand how your customers are using the platform, then how are you going to have high quality engagements with them? So you need to make sure that you understand the data, know what your customers have purchased, know what they're doing within your product, know who's the top user out of your full customer base, and really start to learn that. And then that helps you to be more proactive. The third thing, which has actually been something that I've learned recently, is, and can help from a cross-functional department standpoint as well, is work with the product team to set up alerts based on that data. So let's say something goes wrong, I'm going to get an alert, and then I can use that technology to proactively start a conversation with the customer. So, for example, they have some sort of sync failure or something like that. I can reach out to the customer and say, "Hey, we saw this happen. How you doing? You okay? Do you have anything that we can help you with?" And that in itself creates so much goodwill with the customer, and makes them happy that I've even doing things like that. I've even experienced having customers, apologize for telling me about bugs because they love the interaction and the product so much, which is a new experience, I have to say.
That's interesting that you say that. It sounds like there's a bit of a disaster looming in the background of this conversation that we'll get into. I like how you broke that down, that idea of being proactive, focusing on engagement, data, and product as a quick little summary. Engagement, the way that I interpreted what you shared was really just that, what's that extra effort that you can apply to lead to that perception of this team is going above and beyond for me. They're making my experience exceptional. We all know that the people we seek to sell to, who we want to use our products, who are using it day in and day out, they're not just using one tool. They're using a lot of different tools. And to varying degrees, these tools provide a experience that people may or may not love. And so I've certainly seen firsthand that when you put that extra effort in, it's noticed because it's not provided by everyone. So it's a very easy way to stand out. All products talk about their differentiator being their customer success team, but few actually commit to it and do the follow through because it takes a lot of work, time, intention, etc. You called out data, using the data to understand how are our customers using the product, what exactly are they doing, who are the top people using the product. Let's build a relationship with them. Let's champion them. Let's put a spotlight on them and help them further their career. Because when you build that and invest into those people, they typically want to take you with them. It establishes that loyalty. I also think that there's probably a potential to explore proactively how they could be using the product in that particular example, especially the more comfortable and familiar you are with other customers who look like that particular customer, who have similar products that they're working on or workflows that they're working with. Then now you can really enter that trusted advisor state with the data to back it up to say, you may potentially see a benefit like this other customer that we work with, and I really think you should try it. So I think it was great that you called out data there. And then product, establishing those internal relationships so that when a problem inevitably happens, because this is SaaS that we're talking about, there's going to be bugs, it's inevitable. How can you mitigate the impact that it has, not just on the user themselves, but the relationship between the company and the other company? So I think that those were all great topics to call out. One question that lingered in my mind, that sounds like it takes a lot of effort. Whenever a lot of effort is required and a lot of intention is required, then that conversation of scale really comes up. How do you scale that type of effort?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think everybody's looking into right now is really trying to figure out how to use AI within customer success. So we've been looking into that as well and trying to see how we can scale efforts that way. Because some of the high touch things that I've always had in my career, being on the enterprise side, are difficult at scale. So if you're working with mid-market, some of the AI tools that they're coming out with this year are really, really compelling and interesting. So that's one way that you can kind of work on scale. I've most of my career has been in high touch. So we're really looking out for making sure that all of our stuff is kind of a custom standard. So we'll start out with a very standard base, and we'll use that across my entire team. And they will create something that's going to work for the 70, 80%, right? So it works in the ideal. It doesn't work for any one particular customer, but it works at that 80% level. Then we add the small customization on top. So that way it helps us to really provide that nice custom looking experience, But on our side, we're not spending as much time like recreating content at each interaction with the customer.
That makes sense. There's a lot of excitement with AI, and it's not because it's replacing people. It really, what you're describing is reducing some of the administrative burden that all individual contributors and even management, in fact, everyone has to deal with, is some sort of administrative burden, even if that's, mining the data and coming to some sort of insight. Like any time spent trying to figure out something is time that could have been spent doing something that actually helps. And so if you're able to reduce that, that certainly makes an impact in reducing some of the demand on a team. I like how you broke it down from really a Pareto explanation. What's going to get us to that 80% that's going to deliver the most value most consistently to our customers? Let's make that our standard process, our standard way of executing these types of engagements. And then it's just that 20% you have to focus on that might vary or change from customer to customer. Not all customers may need it. Not all customers may get it. Because some companies decide to charge extra for that really custom approach. There's nothing wrong with, making a buck off of helping others make a buck. That's the capitalist in me, in all of us. But I think that's a great idea, a great explanation of how you can scale. Now, one of the questions that's always on my mind is people have a lot of perspectives on these different topics that we explore on this show. What's a strongly held opinion in customer success that you completely disagree with?
Yeah, so I think I had touched a little bit on it earlier, but I want to double down on it because one of the things I really don't like is that we think customer success is its own department. What we do need as customer success department, it's really a joint effort across every department within the company. And everybody needs to be involved and engaged in creating value for the customers. And really the best organizations that I've seen really think about the customer in everything that they do. And it really creates that culture of partnership with customers, not like, oh, they're the customer, we're going to do the thing. But it's really like, I will give something to you, you give something to me. So it's about partnering with their customers and not just thinking of them as transactional. So that's how we create long-term relationships with our customers. And then customer success as a department, I really see them as kind of the glue that helps kind of work with the other departments and the customer. So we go in there and we're really the voice of the customer internally. And a good head of customer success should be working really closely with these other departments, like product and engineering or like sales and marketing. Because for product, CS can help product managers build up those relationships. They can give the impact to engineering so that they know the why behind what they're building. And on the sales cycle side, I've really found that as I get more involved with the sales cycle, I bring authenticity to those interactions, because what I can share that sales can't share is very specific customer stories. Oh, I have customers doing X, Y, Z within the product. And that makes them think of your solution as real, implemented, and like able for them to implement too. It doesn't seem like some sort of hypothetical. It feels real to them on the sales side. And then, of course, for the marketing side, it's a very close partnership with customer success. I love customer marketing, even though it's not very prevalent, I know, across multiple organizations, but they help you build revenue within your customer base and expansions. And then they also help your customers to implement, because they need help, especially on the enterprise side, talking about your solution internally, because they're going to be your best champions, is if you can help them out in that way.
I think this is a topic that can't be spoken about enough. The idea that customer success is not a department, it's really an operating strategy. And that's something that manifests across all departments in the company, or at least it should. And by that, what I mean is everything is focused on making the customer successful. Sales is focused on making prospective customers successful because they're evangelizing this product, this solution to a problem that they're having. And the goal is not necessarily, this is an ideal world, the goal is not necessarily to sell the product, it's to solve the problem that they're having in such a way that brings such value and joy that you build loyalty with people who then want to spread the gospel of the solution that you're having. I like how you talked about CS as really representatives, like internal representatives for the customer, almost like elected officials, except you don't always have a choice about who you're working with. Of course, the customer can certainly protest and say they want to work with someone else, which is a terrible sign if you've ever experienced that. If you have someone on your team and a customer says, I never want to talk to that person again, get me someone else. Definitely listen to your customers and that sort of thing. But treating customer success as actual representatives, as advocates for the customer internally. So driving those productive conversations up the chain and to the necessary departments, who again should all be focused on customer success. I love that you brought up customer success as a resource for selling, of bringing some concrete examples of what people, like the people that you're speaking with, have done and the impact that they've had to make it more real, because that really helps people understand that they're not making the wrong choice. I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Jolt Effect. It's by the team that did the Challenger sale as well as the Challenger customer. And one of the things they talk about is that for a long time, people thought people bought on the fear of missing out. But what they really buy on is what they avoid buying is this fear of messing up. And so it's a big decision. They don't want to mess up. So the more that you can show them, people like them in their situation went through these same problems until they actually installed this type of software or used this tool, and then they had this effect. So that can't be understated. And then all of that ties very well into marketing, because marketing needs that. Marketing's entire goal is, how do we reach these people that we seek to serve and show them that we understand them and we've heard them and we have something for them, and do it in an authentic way? And so really just emphasizing that idea of putting customers first and making it every department's job to make the customer successful is critical to your own company's success. I think it's a great thing that you called out.
Yeah, I like the fear of messing up. I haven't heard that one before, but I feel it, when you're talking to the customer and they're kind of like, well, we're in this together now. I just heard that last week, right? Our ships are tied together. So they're trusting you with their careers and their reputations. So it's very personal. And, we have to be good shepherds on customer success and within the entire company of that reputation.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's an interesting book. I love it because I have heard in sales, you really got to focus, like, these other guys are doing it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind. And to some degree, that's true. There has to be an element of that in the story, but really the thing that gets people to listen, like, other people are doing it, okay, but really making it concrete of, like, look, these other people, they were kind of scared to make the decision too, but they did it. They did it because they saw that we were able to deliver blank, blank, and blank. The sales side of me is coming out right now. And then, but again, it goes back to that point of people want to see other people that they identify with, who essentially represent themselves in some way, shape, or form. They want to see what they've been able to do, because that provides that safety, that assurance that this is possible. People like me are able to do it. I can do it too. So can't be understated enough. Well, we've talked about a lot of concepts, but I really want to get into story time. So I know you've got a disaster story ready for us. Take us through your story.
I do at that, Josh. I had to pick a good one for you, and I think this is a good one. So my career has been in startups in the SaaS world, and always B2B enterprise. So with enterprise always comes a lot of different things. But in this particular company, it was an early stage SaaS company, had a lot of tech debt. I think that even after a couple of years, there was still founder code in the product. Not good. You don't want that. Don't let your founder code stay in your product for too long. We had a lot of hacks that were kind of like features in the product, which nobody cleaned up. There were workarounds because they made that classic startup mistake of just opening the APIs. Like, oh, well, we use these to, talk to it from our back end, and opened them up. And so then there's a bunch of that sitting on top of the product to try to make use cases fit. And for really being a small company, there were lots of communication issues across departments, and the culture of collaboration was really lacking, and it was not being cultivated by the leadership. And there was often infighting with the executive team that then, of course, trickled down because it's a small company. So rumor mill is strong at small companies. And as a leadership team, you have to be really careful about the ways that your interactions with your colleagues then get perceived outside of the executive team. And then also within this company was, we had spent some years doing POCs, right? So it was like POC land. Everything's great in POC land, right? Because nobody's actually using the product. They're not putting it through its paces. So we're like, oh, this is going to be fine. We got a couple of things because it's enterprise. We've got some features that they want to set out. And so we were looking to actually deploy some of those features within the product now that were more enterprise grade features, which if anybody has been around enterprise software, those can be pretty heavy feature sets themselves. So all this to say is that, we're really starting to move. We're kind of at the infancy of our implementation, and the system really isn't that pressured test, not on full scale implementations.
So it sounded like this clearly something was working, or at least perceived to be working, because people were able to use it in POCs, which for those who don't know, that's a proof of concept. That's, a common thing typically in the sales side of making sure that the product works for them and their needs. And they're proving out the concept of even solving whatever problem they're trying to solve with this type of technology. And there's probably a whole episode we can do on POCs. But so it sounded like from the beginning, the product itself, you called it out. It had tech debt. It had founder code. So this is something that's not on the most stable foundation. It's a real stretch of the minimal viable product type philosophy that you hear a lot with quote unquote lean startup.
It had the V.
Yeah. It's got to be viable. Yeah. Or oh man, I could talk all day about what is actually minimally viable. But you also called out a different type of debt. Sounds like there was a bit of a collaboration communication debt in the company as well. And that I'm sure is going to come into play later. But I just want to emphasize that idea of tech debt, collab debt, and not having, like you said, not having that pressure test of a fully, truly implemented solution because of the limited usage of the POC, which some people can take as a sign that they are success and their product meets a market need, which is not necessarily true. Anyway, so, okay, that's where we're starting. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So As far as my role goes, at that time, I was in charge of the customer success team. I sat under the VP of sales and customer success. And then I was really responsible, and my team was responsible for the onboarding of customers and then also maintaining that relationship and driving value for our customers. So, we're fully customer facing, and we're like doing our job well, right? We're doing very high touch customer success. We're converting those POCs. We're doing the weekly calls. We have personal relationships with the customers. I knew their kids' names. Actually, still am friends with quite a few of those customers. I have their personal cell phone numbers. We're texting back and forth about what wine we're going to drink that night. This is well set up on the relationship side. And our book of business kind of looked like 5 people globally, not just in the US, supporting over $16 million worth of enterprise revenue. So not even fully tapped revenue. It's like you could expand each of them several more times.
5 people at your company were supporting all of that? Oh my goodness. Back to that conversation about scale, you must have learned real quick some tips and tricks, maybe even your own CS debt on scaling with 5 people. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, that's you're painting quite the picture here. So what happened?
Yeah. So like I said, we were doing our job well on the CS side and on the sales side. So the sales team was, really starting to get successful. We're getting those POCs done. We're starting to convert them. And then, on our side, we're really driving usage. So we were moving that year from like 2, 3, 4 sites implemented up to hundreds implemented with like thousands of monthly active users. And that's a lot of users on the platform. And we had done that growth like really well that year. But like I said, we were kind of missing some of the enterprise features. And so we're asking the product team to put those in. There's a lot of pressure starting to build because the foundation wasn't there. There's lots of bugs happening, and it puts a lot of pressure on the product to have that much usage. And really, all of this came to a head when we were going for our big enterprise product release. So at the time, we'd save up all our features for one big bang release. And we did this at the end of the year of all times because, right? Sounds great. So we decided to deploy that all at the end of the year, but there was a big problem with this deploy. It wasn't, I don't know, with significant lack of QA, something happened, and they deployed it, and it seems like they didn't even look at it. They didn't even open up the product. And so the next day, like we go in, like we always do, go in the product, open it up, the whole thing's broken. And like the customers start calling us, right? Because
you say broken how?
So you'd go in, but you could log in. So I will say that you can log in, but
credit where credit's due. You could still log in.
It doesn't actually use the thing, which any customer will tell you. You're like, yeah, features are great. But if I can't use the thing, then it's useless to me. And those are just table stakes. It has to work.
Absolutely.
It just has to work.
Absolutely. So customers started calling you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun day. So they started calling us. And of course, they have our cell phone numbers. So we're getting texts, we're getting calls, we're getting support tickets. So it's between us and support. We're like trying to triage all of this incoming because this software was actually very critical to their operations. And when operations don't work, that means a lot of money, right? There's no, if you shut down operations, that company is not making money, and then you're in big trouble. So as a software company, you need to understand that type of impact. Yeah, you could log in and maybe you could do one thing, but if you can't do their use case anymore, it's essentially completely broken. So we start getting those phone calls, and I had told you about the lack of collaboration internally. We start to escalate to engineering, but there's hardly any response from the engineering side because because they're like, well, I mean, it technically works. I'm like, but it doesn't work because it's not doing the things that the customer needs it to do. And here's all of the things that are broken.
It technically works, but it doesn't work. That's almost
so
paradox.
But like, well, I mean, they can log in and they could, use it for this like really easy use case. I'm like, yeah, but that's not how they actually use the product.
Yeah. Well, to your point, when you become so embedded that you're an essential part of the operation that's there to make the company money, which is, a significant portion of where you're providing the value, and then that stops. And so now you're actively preventing them from producing. Now you're detracting from value. And those people, like you talked about before, they're putting their reputations on the line, working for you, vouching for you. That becomes an emotional toll of, we're not producing because of this tool. You wanted us to bring this tool in. This is kind of a perfect storm that you're describing here. And then on top of that, for people to be like, well, technically, it's not completely broken. So let's get all the facts out. Okay. Yeah. They can log in and they can do this cool thing that we just deployed.
Yeah. It's real cool when they come back and they go, well, I need facts. And you're like, not emotional responses. Because at this point, my team's getting yelled at. I'm getting yelled at. And they're like, well, you're all emotional because you're getting yelled at. I'm like, well, let's read into that a little bit about maybe why I'm getting yelled at. But, of course, it's like, let's take the emotion out of it and figure out like what level of priority is. Like, no. Well, go look.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're almost describing a defensiveness from the other department in this scenario. That's interesting. So you're escalating, you're still getting calls. What happens next?
Well, eventually one of our customers, we are escalating internally to up the food chain, and then also customers are emailing our CEO. So of course, once the CEO gets involved, then it's like, okay, hey, pay attention to what customer success is saying, which was great. And I was very appreciative that we started doing that. So what we ended up doing is we did start ticketing Stone for a while, and we just used spreadsheets. We went back to old school because then everybody could see it. Everybody knew what was going on. And this actually helped for a bit to get internal tracking on it, because not everybody has access to every system, and it's confusing if you're not used to it. So, went back to the old handy dandy spreadsheet.
Yeah, a little bit more work involved, but the impact of everybody being able to see it, that's such a great call out, because obviously a ticketing system is essential for providing support and following up and tracking and all of that stuff, but not everyone has access. Any additional user, it's an additional license to you. You're really kind of getting into a story within a story here of like the opportunities for some of these support systems for providing the visibility that's needed to make the decisions to satisfy the customers. But we all go down that rabbit hole.
Maybe someday somebody can come up with a startup for that one.
Yeah, exactly. It started right here. So don't take that idea, all you listeners out here. So you've got the spreadsheet, you're logging all the issues in there. What happens next?
Yeah, so this was actually a helpful tool for us because then we could log the issues. We knew which customers were affected by what, and we could come in and help prioritize what was the most egregious bugs. Unfortunately, bug fixes were very slow, and on that particular release, we hadn't put in any way to roll it back, which is what we probably would have done had we even thought about how we were going to release this out to customers. So tip of the day, if you're doing enterprise, make sure if you're doing a major release, have mitigation tactics already built up.
Have a backup plan.
Some backup plan because things go wrong despite sometimes your best efforts.
So you identified all these problems and it still took time to fix it. Was it because these problems were so complex, or did this come back to some of the urgency issues you were talking about?
I mean, to their credit, some of them were complicated and to resolve. I don't know, I'm not very technical, so I just have to take it what they say. But it felt like as we were getting towards the end where there wasn't that recency, they seemed to just put them back into the normal cycle when it would have been good to just get through the list, because even though they were lower down, they were still affecting one or two customers. And remember, like, we had large customers at the time. They were large enterprise customers. So affecting one customer affects quite a bit of revenue within the customer base. So that was not great. And the fact that things take so long makes customers more angry. They may have been sometimes they're nice about it at the beginning, but then if you take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to resolve a major problem for them, then that's really going to sour that relationship. With that customer.
Yeah. And, you can know that the team is working very hard to get it resolved, but at some point you got to see some results. It's like if you were to go to a fancy steakhouse. We'll say fancy because expensive, and enterprise software typically tends to be a premium price attached to it. And it's like you go in there, you order a steak, makes sense. You're at a steakhouse. That's the product that you expect them to have quickly out. And it turns out, well, for whatever reason, there's a major redesign of the kitchen and the flow is off. And so now, all the orders are taking some time, and there's a lot of orders and it's backed up. So, we're working hard. We're trying to get you your steak. And you're right there and you're like, okay, I get it. As a human, I understand that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, all of that. But I am starving here and I'm paying all this money to eat this steak. It's kind of like what we're talking about. So kind of, if you ever find yourself on the other side of like, well, I don't know why it's not a big deal. What would you do if you ordered a steak and you never got it? Anyway,
I'd be pretty angry. Nobody likes it when I'm angry.
Yeah,
that's what would happen.
That's what would happen. Well, so what happened next?
Yeah, so as relationships start to sour with customers, they're still yelling at the team. We're having to apologize over and over and over again, which is, something you get good at customer success, but it's not something you want to do long term, right? We're starting to also affect our internal relationships too, because when things aren't going well with the customers and, things aren't seeming to happen from other departments, then those relationships start to get impacted too. And, I mentioned earlier how I think customer success needs to be kind of that glue internally. If things aren't actually sticking together, then we have a really big problem in it being able to be responsive to our customers. And in the end, it really affects your reputation as a company. And especially in enterprise, everybody talks. Everybody talks to each other, or they move from one enterprise to the next. And your reputation is so important, especially in the enterprise space, because there's only so many Fortune 100 customers, right? 100 to be exact. And so that really hurts you as a business, and it is hard to recover from that. So that is really what started to happen, is that our reputation to our customers and even our personal reputations, right? Because they're trusting their customer success manager to go get things done for them. And so that hurts personally too.
Yeah, that's tough. It's a tough situation because on one hand, you have to represent the company and you have to try to maintain a positive light about it. But at the same time, you've built these personal relationships with people because that's what people do. And we're all people and we shouldn't be so corporate from a company perspective. Anyway, that's another episode. But it's a difficult situation to empathize, to understand, to even want to be like, I know it sucks. Like, I'm ashamed of what happened. You know, it's hard. It's hard. It affects company's reputation. It affects the individual. You know, we had one guest on the show who talked about with the company that he worked with, just having this feeling of not living up to like his own standards.
Yes.
Because he had to sacrifice so many different things. He had to compromise on things that he didn't want to compromise so that he could represent the company.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies get that wrong, right? Because, you know, you hear all the time, you know, do you think you're not replaceable? Or, you know, you hear those things all the time from, you know, you hear it in movies, you hear it through social media, all that type of thing. And yeah, of course, everybody's replaceable. But a leader should be thinking about their people as individuals that make up a company. Because what else is a company except a bunch of people getting together in a group being like, I think we should go do this, right? And attempting to go in the same direction.
Absolutely.
And to ignore that or say like, oh, well, I'll just replace everybody here. That's a bad place.
Not a good leader. Not a good leader there. Yeah, I completely agree with that. So reputations being impacted, is there any end in sight? Is there any, or is it just going to slowly die at this point?
You know, of course, we launch it at the end of the year. So, you know, eventually things got resolved. The vacation schedules made it even worse because you're waiting for, like, everybody goes to Thanksgiving. And so then the issue lingers another week, right? Because nobody's there actually working. And so that kind of made it drag out for a very long time. So we did eventually get things solved. We did a lot of apologies and stuff. But, you know, in the end, there were a lot of unhappy customers. And, you know, I can't directly attribute that one product release to churn, like a specific churn, but it's definitely one of the things that we heard in exit interviews that, you know, the product is unstable, things like that. So it becomes another tick in the box against you. And when there become other alternatives on the market, customers move. No matter how much implementation you've done, no matter how many personal relationships you've built up, if the thing doesn't work, they will leave.
As they should. If you don't get your steak, get out.
Yeah, I would leave and I would go to McDonald's, you know?
Yeah.
Might not like it as much as a steak, but
you will solve the problem that you were having, which was hunger, right? So this is the thing is like, we'll get rid of you. We'll just go back to what we were doing. We might replace you with something, but we're probably just going to do what we were doing because at least this didn't happen to us.
Yeah, at least it didn't stop production. So,
Yeah.
that sometimes they end up with a lesser of two evils.
Yeah. I mean, this is a bit of a bubble that kind of burst that was really founded on the tech debt, the communication, collaboration, teamwork debt that you described at the beginning of the story. And it culminated into this, it wasn't, because you mentioned a very specific product release, but I'm guessing, I'm inferring based off some of the other comments that you made is that this was a bit of a pattern.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this wasn't the last one, right? So, we went about implementing some controls and working on getting better at releasing. But in the end, it happened over and over and over again where we would break something pretty major. We'd have to go back. I mean, I remember one particular customer that I think I apologized personally to at least on like 4 or 5 times. We've almost put ourselves on a performance improvement plan.
Wow.
So that really hurt the company, right? You can't have that many bad releases and major issues with your customers and then expect them to stay and also expect everybody else to stay. So, suffice it to say, I eventually left the company as well. But when I left, it was better, but it wasn't completely solved.
Yeah, you gotta do you. If you see, there's only so much change an individual can impact, and I know I certainly like to think of myself in this ideal way of like, well, I fight for it and win people to my side, but my God, is that exhausting? And at the end of the day, I really believe in this concept of putting people first. And that means putting people above the company, and you're a person. So you have to put yourself first and know when, you're seeing the same patterns, it takes a toll on you to respond to this type of stress and deal with it and be held personally responsible over something that you cannot control in any way whatsoever. No, you have to put yourself first and leave, because the company will not hesitate to put itself first and ask you to leave for any reason.
Right.
For any reason. Well, it was quite the experience. What were some of your takeaways from that?
Yeah. So, I try to turn everything into a learning opportunity and, even if it's learning what not to do. And some of the things that I think have really shaped the way that I view customer success and successful businesses, it comes from that experience. So, one of the first things I learned was really to make sure that engineers and really anybody in the company knows what and why customers use the product. Like, what are they using it for? It helps them build that empathy that will make them rally around a particular issue. It gives them a sense of pride in what they've built because they are building great things, right? And we want to celebrate that with our friends on the engineering team. So one of the things that I've personally done in my next career has been to make sure to bring back those customer stories into the engineering and product organization. I mean, we were trying to do it before, but hit on some deaf ears.
Back to that communication collaboration debt you were talking about.
Yeah. Another thing that I really think helps make, especially major releases, you don't want to do it on every small release, but a major release where you're really changing the product is make sure you involve customer success. Customer success can be great advocates for you in the release process, and they can also help to test things with real use cases, right? We can give good testing scenarios. We can look at the product prior. It's one of the things that I've done now is, we help by going into staging and just doing all of that testing, making sure that it meets the use case that it was supposed to meet from the product requirements. So just involve your customer success team earlier to, especially on large releases.
I think that's a great one. I like the first one that you called out. Really is building empathy within every organization, but particularly the engineering team, making sure to cultivate that understanding of the importance of the product being used this way. Because I've seen firsthand, I worked with a company where at one point we flew an engineer out to the customer site to like really figure out what is this bug and why is it happening and why is it only happening here. And there was a lot of dismissiveness before that, but once the engineer was there, seeing the product in use and seeing the frustration and seeing the hope, it really changed the perspectives there, and that bug
and
ultimately got fixed.
If you even invest in that for one engineer, then they can bring that back to their team and then speak kind of more in the engineer language to everybody else and share that experience.
Absolutely. It spreads. Empathy spreads. That's for sure. And then you mentioned customer success really as a layer of quality assurance, which I think makes total sense. You're not going to find anyone aside from the customer who understands what the customer is using the product for and why and how they're going to think about it, how they're going to react to, this change or that change or whatever. So it's such a critical layer in the QA process that, after you go through your QA review, like the CS team should be involved in really examining and pressure testing, at least pre-pressure testing, whatever that capability is.
Right. At least we opened it up and made sure.
That's right. Yeah. You can log into it. So
yeah, I think overall though, one of the major learning out of this, if you really tried to figure out what the actual pain point is the leadership needs to foster a culture of collaboration. And then that really was the core of the problem, right? It wasn't about, they should have done releases better, or, we should have involved CS earlier. It's when things happen, you have to already have that established collaboration within the company so that everybody moves and they move in the same direction, right? Which is leading you towards your customers' success. It's not something that you can just hope for either. It really has to come with a lot of intention and work from the leadership team. I'm now on a leadership team that we spend a lot of time thinking about this. We spend a lot of time working on this because it doesn't just happen. You can't just sit back and wait for the rest of the team to collaborate. You have to first make sure that you're modeling that with the rest of your executive leadership team. And then each department then needs to talk about collaboration and the ways that you can collaborate and encourage collaboration in everything that it is that you do.
To your point, if the people responsible for making the customer successful, which is, again, the entire company, if they can't work together, they're going to struggle to deliver on that goal of making the customer successful. Can't be understated enough. I think really each department, each internal employee needs to think of the other department, the departments that they're not in, as their customer internally, right? Because it's not just the external customers. You've got people relying on you to help them bring value and feel good and all that. Like, that's part of the teamwork. And so really customer success is just as critical inside the company as it is outside the company.
Yeah, I agree with you, Josh. That's a good statement.
I hope to have a few of those in my life. Well, look, this has been a great conversation. Certainly enjoyed exploring your perspective on different aspects of customer success. I feel like I've had some realizations myself, some lessons learned just through talking with you and hearing your story. Sounds like quite the disaster. I'm glad you were able to get out. I hope you have found yourself in a situation that is less chaotic than what you described.
A different chaos.
Different chaos.
But it's a good one. No, this is very cathartic. Thank you,
okay.
Josh.
Well, good. That's the goal, right? And hopefully everyone listening who can relate to some of these things feels seen, feels heard to some degree, because we're out there.
I'm sure others have been there. I'm sure they have.
I am too. Well, look, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
I don't know about you, but I thought that was a fantastic examination of customer success. I had a ton of learnings from our guests, and I'm going to recap them here. Of course, if you had learnings, I certainly want to hear from you and hear your thoughts. One of my first takeaways is this idea of value. The product offers the potential of value. Customer success helps customers realize the value. And value isn't just dollar signs. It's not just numbers. It's also a feeling. So we cannot overlook perceived value, which is way more subjective when discussing return on investment, metrics, dollars earned back, dollars saved, dollars made, etc. Now, another thought that really resonated with me was the idea that customer success is proactive, not reactive. It drives engagement with both the product and the company. And some of the best ways to be proactive is outreach, extra effort, data, and internal collaboration across departments. And that actually leads me to my next takeaway. Customer success is really a company philosophy, not just a specific team. It is every department's responsibility to bring value to the customer. The ways in which each team's contributions do that may differ, but the goal is the same. Sales, as an example, brings value to customers by helping to diagnose the root cause of pain felt by prospective customers, showing them how they can solve it and setting them up to do something about it. Marketing engages with, the market. And it's doing that to make sure that the company is in tune with the needs and wants of the people the company seeks to serve. Product and engineering, they're building the tool, the critical component that customers use to achieve value. Everyone works together for customer success. If you don't have that, you could be setting yourself up with disaster. Speaking of, how about that story? Could you relate? This certainly sounds familiar to me. Not all launches go as planned. Does anything really? But how you come together to respond is critical. And in some cases, it could be make or break for both customer and employee churn. Now, if you felt that pain before, you'll enjoy some of the content and resources we've published to our site. So go to www.disasterrecovery.com to dive deeper into topics like these. And before you go, take a second and subscribe to the show. Let us know how much these stories resonate with you by leaving us a rating and a review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any podcast player of your choice. Also, share these lessons with a coworker or even a boss who's going through it with you. Who knows? Maybe your story of disaster could be next.